How lucky are you guys? Insurance before lunch, insurance after lunch. Life couldn't get any better, eh? It's pretty good. We've got a bit of a presentation going on. I'm just wondering, is it going to come on the screen here? Not that there's many words on it, so you probably don't really need to see too much of it. We're just going to have a bit of a chat because I think the important part is getting some questions out and getting some information out that we can all understand and discuss, because there is a lot of things about insurance like, oh, it's so complicated, it's too hard, it's too expensive, it's all this stuff, but a lot of it comes down to risk in the end, and what is your risk tolerance and what is the insurer's risk tolerance. So there's some of the things we're going to talk about. I've got the zapper here actually, so I can see if this works. And about me, that's a photo with me with lots less hair, and probably about 10 years ago, so I'll claim it. And we've already read about that, and you've already heard enough about me. Yeah, a bit more of an intro. Oh yeah, what we're talking about here, that's not back on, so you guys can read that as good as I can. But the aim of this discussion is to ensure that festival promoters are educated in understanding the state of play in event insurance. That being that you understand what options you have access to for insurance, but also decisions you can make about what you're doing, whether it's you're involved in council, whether it's you're involved as an event promoter, an event organiser, a company that provides services to that, whatever it might be. So what are the standard covers a festival promoter should first be considering to ensure risk protection? Some of these things you would be aware of, and some of them you wouldn't be aware of depending on where you sit in the risk register of what you do. But event cancellation insurance is obviously about the event not being able to go ahead due to an unforeseen event. So this is something that obviously most people need to consider. This is the one most people understand the least about, so we'll come back to that and talk a bit more about it. But things that link on from the event cancellation is adverse weather, for example. So, like I said earlier, not unpleasant weather that makes it not a nice experience to eat cheese and wine, or not nice to be getting wet while you're watching your favourite orchestra or blues artist or rock and roll or EDM or whatever artist it is. But the adverse weather is really important because obviously we've seen some situations recently where large events have gone down due to that, but there's obviously many small events that go down due to that as well. Non-appearance links into that, and that's where you have a key person, someone who's key to your event. So we talked about KISS earlier, so it's just easy to stay on the same subject because we're already on that one, and they're in town right now. If something happened to one of them right now and they couldn't perform, that event's not happening. You don't have a KISS show with me, and if you've heard me sing, you'd know it's definitely not the case. I will not be getting up on stage to be Gene, is it Gene Simmons? I don't even know the names. Shows how good I am with that. But I'm not getting up to be Gene. It ain't happening. But if you have the right insurance in place, then you protect against that. Not all events rely on a particular person. A lot of them are about the whole thing. And I know a lot of festival promoters look at it and go, hey, we've got so many artists performing, it actually doesn't matter if some of them don't come. Now, we do have the other problem where some of them realise that it's the top 3 or 4 that are their main source of people buying tickets to their event. So you can have someone on it at midday and the gates are open, but there might only be 100 people in the gates so far. If that person's not coming, your event still goes on. Even if you have to delay your gates an hour because there's been an accident and people can't get in and you've delayed gates, that's not going to matter. But as you get on further in the day, it becomes more important. So we do talk to festival promoters about saying, hey, well, who are your top 4 or your top 5? Which ones, if they couldn't appear, would affect your event being able to go ahead? And sometimes it's what we call a catastrophic non-appearance, where it's multiple of, i.e. 2 of the top 4. So if 2 or more of the top 4 can't appear, is your event still on or not? And if you got to 3 of the top 4, you know, let's say there was an accident somewhere, they were stuck in the city, couldn't get to the venue because there's a gas leak or there's something, who knows what can happen. You can imagine things up for days. They can't get to site. If your top 3 acts don't appear at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock to close out the festival, is anyone going to be happy with that? So non-appearance can kick in even if it's not dependent on just the one act. So you've got to sort of figure out what your exposure is and where that sits with that. Liability, everyone knows about. We're going to deep dive a little bit further into that because that's the main one everyone thinks about, and to think about some of the things that you can do. Equipment, your contracts are really important. We all think, contracts are important when we buy a house or when we enter into other things in life, but quite often we don't dig down into the detail. And as they say, the devil's in the detail, and it really is. And if you've signed a contract, that could be you agreeing to something you don't know you're agreeing to. So typically, if you're hiring equipment into your festival or into your event, you become responsible for that equipment whilst it's in your control. But then people go, but I've got liability insurance, and it says that I've got cover for goods in control. And it's like, yeah, but that's for if you're negligent. Liability is about negligence, which, as I said earlier, the word I use loosely is negligence. So if you're not negligent, and it was just something, it was a weather event that you had no control over, you haven't been negligent, but that equipment's now damaged. The person who hired the equipment's going, well, our contract says, well, you've got it, you're responsible for it, so you now owe us that money. So if you haven't taken insurance to protect against that, you don't have it. But people often think that the liability is going to be what saves them, and that's not necessarily the case. So if you're hiring equipment in, you should be checking your contracts, but you can take out cover that covers equipment whilst you've got it on hire and whilst it's in your control. And a lot of people have also talked about, well, the company's there with it. They're delivering it and they're operating it. But they might set it up on the Thursday. There might be a rehearsal day or a production day on the Friday, and then the show's on the Saturday and so forth. So that means every night overnight, who's got responsibility for it? The event or the festival, because they're not sleeping there with it whilst, they've set it up and they're the ones that set up and they're the ones that brought it there, but now it's in your control. And we had a circumstance, it's over 10 years ago now, I think, at Womadelaide, and it had finished on the Sunday night, or the Saturday night at this stage, I can't remember, maybe it was the Sunday, and must have been the Sunday night. They'd packed all the stuff down, and we look after the festival, we looked after the staging company, and we looked after the production company, and they'd packed the stuff down and they had it on stage in a back corner, ready for collection. And it had gone through all the night, and those work lights, like the lights that are not like the lights of Point S, but that kind of light, and it had been sitting up against the side of the stage wall. Well, at 5:30 in the morning or 6:30 in the morning, when they were due to come and collect, not too much later at 9 o'clock, the heat from that sitting there all night started a fire. And obviously the fire expands and goes. So they're lucky that didn't happen before the festival started on the Thursday night or whatever, otherwise you wouldn't have had all the gear for the actual festival, and that would have caused problems for the festival. But that happened, it went onto the stage, so a bunch of the stage was burned, all the gear, the audio, the lighting gear that was all piled up ready for the truck to back up and push in, that was all gone. And so that was about $1 million, and all of a sudden gone. So it can happen just for reasons that you don't expect. Because everyone goes, it's equipment outdoors, it'll be a weather problem, or it'll be a wind problem. We weren't expecting the stage to catch fire and then take it all out. So that's one of the reasons to consider equipment. Voluntary workers, a lot of festivals revolve on voluntary workers. It doesn't matter how big or small you are, typically you still revolve on some voluntary workers. So the voluntary workers is actually really quite cheap and doesn't often get claimed on. Well, hopefully not, because otherwise, if there's more claims in an area, then premiums go up, of course. But it's quite cheap, and what it protects you from is a volunteer, if they get injured whilst working for you, it'll pay a small weekly amount. Because some volunteers are people that are, full professionals, full-time workers and stuff like that, but quite often volunteers are uni students or people who have some spare time. Not always the case, so I'm not suggesting that's the only volunteers you get, but quite often that's how a volunteering system works. And they would normally have a job wherever they may work, Macca's or Coles or the bar or whatever it might be, and they can't then go and earn their normal weekly wage, their $300 a week they earn from their casual job, which they need to live. This policy would then pay them their weekly earnings, so whilst they recover from the injury they've incurred whilst volunteering at your event. The best part about that is it then stops them trying to sue you. Because if something's happened to someone and they can go, but you were negligent, so I'm suing you, that works out worse for you. If they go, okay, well, you're going to pay my expenses, my weekly expenses so I can keep living, they go, well, that's fine, because I really like the festival and that's why I come, because that's why I volunteer here, etc. So voluntary workers is quite important and really not that expensive at all. What has changed in each of these key insurance areas? Well, voluntary workers hasn't changed. I think I sort of just went through that. Equipment hasn't really changed. Mind you, we've had a few events get caught out with bad weather and stuff like that. So there has been a few little claims here and there. One interesting one on equipment, we did have a guy that was testing his laser. He's a laser guy. He tests his lasers before they go out. Something was happening one day. He normally tests it against this material that can't burn, because if you have a laser somewhere for a long period of time, it burns. So don't ever look at a laser for long. You'll blind yourself. If they go down a camera for a while, they're ingrained into the camera and the camera's stuffed. But in this case, he was shooting it back into his factory, and this guy. I still find this not amusing, as in, but it's an interesting story. It's not good that it happened, and he's since taken other measures. But he doesn't have the sense of smell, and he's firing it back into his factory, and it's on a cardboard box rather than normally on the thing that doesn't burn. Next thing you know, he hadn't realised because he couldn't smell the smoke. And before you knew it, this factory's going up in flames, and then it's hitting something. So he's taking the forklift in to pick this pallet up. There's like video footage and everything. Picking up the pallet, taking the pallet off, because that was the pallet that had the burning stuff, but it had caught onto some other stuff, and then the fire brigade are there, and it got all really exciting. But it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, that kind of stuff, right? So it's just another example of, if you had that stuff coming to your event, that stuff's your event as well. But you can't be too careful about knowing what could cause something to go wrong with that. But things like that will cause, if too many things like that happen, cause premiums to go up, because the analogy of insurance is the premiums of many people pay for the losses of a few. So if the losses start happening to many people, there's not enough premiums from the many people to pay for the losses of many. It's only the premium from many people to pay for the losses of a few. So he's since installed a audible smoke detector. So if he ever does it again, which I'm sure it's never going to happen because he's learned his lesson now, he'll always make sure it's pointed to something that's not going to burn. But if it ever does happen, the noise will trigger him off and he'll be fine. So equipment's all right. Voluntary workers is all right. Liability, I'm about to deeper dive into slightly. The event cancellation non-appearance market, it got trashed pretty hard. You heard me talk about Wimbledon. We talked about Blues Fest, having the communicable disease cover as well. So things like that, communicable disease put a lot of losses into the market. And then prior to that, in Australia, we'd had bushfires, California wildfires. That was throwing losses into the market. Then we had bad weather events. This past season was pretty bad for us. You know, events where they'd arrive on site thinking, we've got to try and get it done, drive on site, sink a foot into the ground. There's nothing getting built on that site, event over. So we had multiple of them and some sizable events. So that market has been hit pretty hard, and in Lloyd's, where a lot of the capacity comes from for that type of insurance, they have to say to Lloyd's, we're going to write this much in this class of business, and then they go, okay, you can write that business. Now, if you're not profitable in that, they end up going, you're not making money in that class, you can't keep writing that class of business. So over the years, if you had have asked me even 5 years ago, I would have said 20 to 30 syndicates regularly writing this class of insurance, and it's dropped more each year as things have got worse. We're probably down to, there's 10 main ones maybe that write a lot of this business, and then you can get some other stragglers that will take 2.5% of that risk, and sometimes you need them on the bigger risk to fill it out. My point being is there's less players and there's less capacity. So some of these bigger festivals or bigger tours are now struggling to find enough insurance to insure it. So if your event's under $1 million, great, because it's nice and easy, it's no problem, even $2 million. But the bigger you get, the harder it is to find all the pieces to pull it together. So that market's definitely changed with that, but also pricing, because, I don't know how it worked in Australia, whether they just thought we're too far away and, they don't know what we're doing, or I don't know, they don't turn the news on or something, I'm not sure, but we'd always had low rates, and people go, oh yeah, you say that, but no, our rates were like far below market compared to what was being insured in the US and the UK and stuff like that. We're now caught up to more so where they are, and everything's risen slightly as well. So that is something that has definitely changed, but it's still readily available. And one of the things we're then going to talk about in a moment is transfer of risk. So you've got to work out what your risk tolerances are, but that's definitely available. The liability is the part I wanted to have just a little brief more chat on, and that is to do with, we've started getting some statistics from insurers, and the bulk of their losses in the liability market, so we're not having trouble with events that are indoors, they're having quite regular losses from events that are outdoors. Typically festivals are outdoors, surprise, because festivals normally means more people, and normally in green paddocks. And when I say paddocks, not necessarily paddock, park, whatever. I even had one the other week where someone stepped out of a portaloo. They've gone to the portaloo, they've stepped out. This is a bit higher than the step out, but they've stepped out and it's all grass. But in this one spot, there's a slight little dip. It was like a pothole, but the grass has grown over it, so everything looks like it's even. And they've stood into that and rolled, and they're like, oh, you've got to pay my medical costs, you've got to pay this, you've got to pay that, I want this, I miss out on this, I haven't been able to go back to work for 3 months, blah, blah, blah. So they build up the story, and then obviously it's like, yeah, where's the money? And that's what festivals are getting caught out with. So that is definitely a problem. And because of that, insurers are now going, well, we were charging this, because typically insurance for liability insurance is how many people have you got coming, that is your risk profile. Because if you have 3 people coming, there's 3 people that have the chance to get injured. If you have 30,000 people coming, there's 30,000 people that have the chance to get injured. So rates have gone up in festivals. It's just across the board. Multiple insurers having the same problem. They're all blaming outdoor festivals. So they've said the rates on outdoor festivals have to go up. So it's as simple as that. It's not terrible as in the cost of what insurance is for events. I don't know what people pay here or anything like that. It's not about what the payment amount is, but it's not bad. It's available. It's easy enough to do, but you have to take some steps yourself. You have to do risk management plans. You have to have event safety plans. You need to know what is going on and how you're handling those things. So that's probably the important thing that I would encourage, and that's what this next slide's about. In respect of liability, what is being done by promoters to help reduce the risk? If you've got an area, if you're running a multi-day camping festival, you've got an area where all the patrons have to walk through, is it a clear, safe, flat area, and is it well lit? So this is one of the things we're asking now. Have you got well lit paths where people need to go? Because the thing we quite often see is people will make an excuse of, oh, it was too dark. I fell over because it was too dark. Like, I'm a bit unsure of that, because why don't people take responsibility? If you haven't eaten your carrots since when you were 3 years old, like your parents told you to, and so you could see in the dark, then you've got an iPhone and you can pull that out, and that's got a light on it these days, right? So put that on if you can't see. But people just don't seem to take responsibility. And some of the craziest claims we've seen are people that are just tripping over something trivial and then going, well, now I've got this and now I've got that, I can't do that. It's a couple $100,000 things. So people too easily get money. So our legal system's partly to blame, but I would suggest no one in this room is actually going to solve that or change that. Not in 5 years and probably not in 10 years. And so the fact is, we need to what are we doing to reduce the risk? So what are the things as festival organisers are you going to do to reduce your risk? Yeah, as I said, lighting is one thing. Ensuring you've got safe ground, doing good checks to make sure there's no trip hazards, things like that. But that's why a risk person is helpful. You go, yeah, that's another cost. Yeah, it is, but then it'll save you in long term. Because if you keep having problems, then insurance will go up. Because if everyone's having the same problem, then the cost will go up. And it all sounds doom and gloom. It's not that bad. But my point is, you need to take some action if you want things to remain the way they should. So that goes to my point about transfer of risk. That's all insurance is. It's you going, I've got this risk. Can I afford to have that risk against myself? And sometimes you don't get a choice because the council that are giving you the land say you've got to have this 20 million liability insurance, otherwise you can't have the land. But you're transferring the risk and going, I'm not going to hold that risk because I don't have that $20 million to hold that risk. And you're going, pa-ching, over to the insurer. You now hold that risk and the risk is now your problem. So you've transferred the risk. But if you're going to transfer the risk, this person over here only wants to take the transfer of risk if you've taken some steps to ensure that you're looking after that risk. Now, you could take those risks, take steps to reduce that risk yourself, which is what you should be doing. But they might only take it on if you've done certain things to reduce your risk. Hence why you need to have the event management plan. They want to see that you've got certain things in place in what you're doing to help reduce that risk. It's like with computers and cybersecurity and all those kind of things. One of the steps you can take is having software that helps try and block people having a crack at you. So that's good, but that still won't necessarily stop you getting hacked. But that is a risk measure. That's one thing you've done to reduce that. So it's the same with insurance. What are the things you're doing to help reduce your risk? Otherwise, someone may not want to take it. So if you've got it's like the weather insurance. This season doesn't look great, and it's not looking good already. But at the same time, if you've taken steps to put ground protection down, so you ensure that the ground's going to be, people are going to be able to walk along the ground and get to where they need to get to, that's a step you've taken that reduces risk, and the insurer goes, okay, if you're going to have that there, then we're cool with it, and we can understand that that's what you've done. You've reduced your risk, we will now take that transfer of risk. But if you're not willing to make any steps to help reduce your risk, then we're not taking your risk either. So you've got to start thinking about, if you're transferring your risk to someone, what's reasonable for them to expect, because you don't just transfer it just because it's really, really bad and you want it to be really bad for them, because if it's going to be really bad for them, then they're obviously going to charge more for that, and that's how that sort of weighs upon. So I think consider if you're transferring your risk, is someone willing to take it? Yes, there is a place for it to go, but there's some things that you're going to have to do to make sure that you're being reasonable about transferring of your risk. Little saying I've got here, don't let the things you can't control affect the things you can control. So there's going to always be things that you can't control, but obviously think about those things that you can control and deal with that accordingly. Take steps to reduce your risk so that way you can transfer your risk. Or in some cases you might choose, hey, I've taken steps to reduce my risk. I don't need insurance. Insurance is only a risk transfer method. You're only taking that to transfer your risk. So if you don't need to, and you don't need all the insurances, you could buy, there were a few of the main insurances, but you could buy insurances pages long, and you'd spend not only all your money from your event, but you'd sell your house and wouldn't even pay for all the insurances, then you'd sell your mum's car and whatever else, and you still wouldn't pay for all the insurances, because there's insurances for days, but you've got to work out what things you accept as risk and what things you transfer as risk. So in general, that's just a bit of a nutshell of insurance, and I'm happy to take any questions. And that's probably me having an alarm. No, it's someone else. Okay, not me for once, that's good. My main point would be, everyone wants to talk about COVID. I talked about before. COVID insurance doesn't exist right now. You can get it through the government things, which is Victoria, kind of New South Wales with the Event Saver, but not really for everyone. Hopefully the governments can still put something together which encourages everyone. But again, I don't think there's any sort of lockdown thing that is going to really affect it. I think the Victorian one, they may have paid a few things, but we know a lot of clients who have taken it and then obviously haven't needed it. There's people in this room who I know have had Event Saver claims and they've gone through. So they have proved that they do work in the event they happen, but I'm sure lockdowns haven't happened for a period now. And I'm guessing they're not going to be the flavour of the month. So that's definitely changed in the insurance landscape, but everything else is still pretty usual. Obviously, we specialise in insurance, so that's what we're passionate about and that's what we do every day. So we're happy to answer questions. As I said, it's not as complicated as sometimes it's made out to be, but it's still not the most exciting subject. So we'll try and lighten it up where we can and try and help you find solutions where you can and encourage you to also find your risk transfer methods that work best for you. So I'm Jason, thank you. And yeah, I'm pretty much done unless anyone wants to ask a couple of questions or any questions. I don't even know what time we've got left. Yeah, has anyone got a question they want to throw at me? Be nice though. Yeah.
My question is just about when council's asked to be listed as an interested party for a community event, what does that mean?
Yeah, great question. And actually we only talked about this at lunchtime. Okay, so we have different terminology here in Australia to what they have in the US as well. So sometimes things get crossed because people have heard terminology and think certain things mean certain things. And in the US it means something to hear. So when we talk interested party, that's the same as people in the US saying additional insured. But if we said additional insured here, it means something different again. So I'll explain what that is. So interested party in Australia means you as the festival, you're naming the council as an interested party. It's saying that we note that you've got an interest for anything that happens out of our negligence, which they essentially automatically have anyhow, because you've taken a policy out that covers the business activities that you do, so you're covered for that. But if it arises out of, term used loosely yet again, negligence, arises out of your negligence, that the council would be covered for something that happens out of your negligence. So, interested party, if they become an additional insured or an insured party, that means that they become you as well. So to be XYZ Festival and such council, as the insured name, which means they have an entitlement to then claim under your policy, and you do not want that. So you do not want them to be an additional insured or an insured party. Interested party, okay. And a lot of insurers will put an extra note with the interested party that it only, it doesn't give them any rights to the policy. It's just confirming their interest is noted. So there is a lot more legal depth into it if you speak to a legal person and dig into it under the back end, but the simple terms of it is that anyone naming in Australia should only be ever naming anyone as an interested party, not as an insured party or an additional insured. The one important thing that raises for me, though, is when you're, as a festival promoter, or whatever it may be, you need to check that all your suppliers and people you get in, whether it's performers, whether it's suppliers of any kind, security, etc., that they have appropriate insurance and cover is in place. And you would typically ask them, hey, can you give us this information and give us a certificate of currency or a confirmation of insurance? When you look at those, there's a couple of key things that you're looking for. One, that your event falls in the period of the insurance which it says for which it's valid. Now, if their policy expires, in a couple of days' time, 1st of September, and your event's on the 7th of September, if they've given you one 2 months in advance, that's fine. You don't have to say to them, I need, 2 months in advance, I need your one that says the new period, because they're renewing it, they're going through the process. As long as once 1st of September comes, they can give you the new one, then that's cool. But so first thing is to make sure the period of insurance covers when they're working for you, that the name of the insured that they're calling themselves is the same as what you've contracted them as, because sometimes people have multiple companies. So if you're contracting ABC security company, and then their policy's in the name of XYZ security, it's like, but we've contracted ABC, so how are they the same people? So it needs to have the name that you've actually contracted. And the second part of that is the services that you've contracted them for. So a lot of insurers will do certificates and won't even say what their business is. They could be a food retailer, but they're doing security work at your event. It doesn't tell you, like how would you know? So I say that the certificate should have the description of their services listed for the services they're providing to your event. So the name is correct, the services they're providing to your event's correct, the date of cover fits within when your event is, and obviously for the limit that you require them to have. And we would normally say it needs to be with a reputable insurer, but most are, again, you were not going to really know that, and most of them are going to be fine in Australia anyhow. So they're probably the key things. We've seen it quite often where a security company will go, here's my certificate, and it'll say that they're, I'm just trying to think of the words they use, but it's like security services, but it's more like security patrol where you go and check their doors locked at night and put the card in, yep, we were here, kind of thing. And if you dig down into it, there's actually a thing on there that says does not cover security at festivals, nightclubs, or outdoor events or something like this. And it's like, but that's what we're contracting you for. So how good's that, mate? That piece of paper's not real good. You can have that one back and get us another one. So they're the kind of things that you need to be aware of for that as a festival promoter. That's really important. And that's some of your risk controls and your risk management is you're getting that to make sure the people you're bringing in are protected, because then that protects you as well. Is there another question? No? Can't really see. No? Yeah, one more. Yep, is that all right? One more? We've got a couple minutes, yep. That's what I was trying to say. I actually don't think it really matters that much in the sense that if you... Depends on who you're saying is listening, but if you're a festival promoter and something's happened and you're responsible and negligent for it, you're responsible by law. Like, if you're responsible by law and it's proven that it's your negligence, then you're going to be paying. Does that mean the council's not covered? Not really. Like, the council's going to go, it wasn't us anyhow, that's them. The only problem is you start to get dragged in. So people start to work out, okay, this person here was this, but because of them they are involved, and they drag them in, and everyone gets dragged into the action. But more and more now they're pushing back going, hey, because of this reason or because of this contract, we had no involvement, so we're not in on the action, and you're on your own. So interested party, it's just a common thing that venues ask for, councils ask for. They're the main kind of people that ask to be noted as an interested party. And I think a lot of it, my take on a lot of it is that they're going, we just want to see that your insurance is correct. If we ask for that, we're going to get a piece of paper with our name on it, and then we know that you've actually done something about it, you've had to ask for it, so it probably means it's legit, you know. I don't really know. Like, it's probably more of a legal thing deeper down, but at the end of the day, you're covered for the activities you are as a festival. So that's another thing we talk about, the activities of the suppliers or anyone you're bringing in being correct. But what are you? Like, is your festival named correctly? You know, if you're doing hazardous activities, you know, if it's like a mountain biking festival, does the insurer know you're mountain biking, or have you just called it the, you know, Jiggy Jig Festival, but they wouldn't even know what you're doing? So if they haven't asked the questions, how do they know what you're doing? And any insurer is going to go, we're excluding injuries are causing out of the mountain biking, because obviously that's a common thing. So then, is there a waiver? And what about if there's negligence? There's a whole lot of more things that come into play once you start adding those type of things. But again, if you're covered for your activities, you're covered for what you do and the negligence that arises out of what you do. And whether someone's listed as an interested party wouldn't matter. If you're negligent, your insurer is going to have to pay. So it wouldn't matter whether the council was listed or not. But I think it gives, I know there's council people in the room, it gives council people comfort that it's named on there. So that's you hate it? Yeah. Yeah. And see, this is where the difference is too with community. Like you mentioned the word community. It's the small ones that are the worst at getting it out of. And the reason being is they're paying a low amount of money, so the people who are servicing them are not making their time available. Like, it's maybe something they do online. And I was speaking to someone before who was saying they were having trouble getting a response from their broker and their insurer and stuff like that because no one's really there. I can't answer that for you or deal with that. It's not me, but I get why it gets frustrating. But again, it's risk management. How do you know? If you don't ask them if they've got it, you don't know. Do you need to have them listed as an interested party, though? Why do you want them listed as an interested party? If they just gave you their certificate, they should get one at the start of the year, or they can ask for one. Once they've got it, they can give it to every event that asks for it. Hey, show us you got insurance. Here's my certificate. Here's my certificate. But then it's someone will come back and go, oh, we want to be known as an interested party. Well, then they've got to go back again and they've got to ask for that. So, yeah, that can be, I agree, that can be time consuming, but that's where it's at. I'm done. Thank you.